Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, first question. Hey Jason, could you give some insight on why 10% resets help to overcome stalls on progression? Pretty straightforward. This is going to be kind of unusual for a lot of you guys to grasp. Alright, exceeding 90% effort has not been shown in studies to increase size or strength. So let's go back and think about that in terms of a 1 rep max. Going over 90% of your 1 rep all out max has not been shown to increase strength. So in other words, if your max deadlift is 500 pounds, doing singles with anything over about 450 to 455 probably isn't going to make you any stronger than if you just did singles with, the 455. Conversely, let's say your 5 rep max is 300 pounds, right? That's your all out 5 rep max, and you hit a stall with it and you reduce it 10% down to 270, right? Maybe 275, and you do sets of 5 with that. Aren't you working with 90%? Isn't that enough to stimulate adaptation? Yes. Is it going to necessarily, when you're dealing with rep work, going to be quite as much stimulation as if you had done 300 with 5? No, it's not. You're probably going to lose 1 or 2 quality reps. However, it is a hell of a lot easier to recover from. If you are training and stalling, let's say you're doing 3 sets of 5, right? And you're hitting your absolute wall with that. You hit your absolute wall with that, and you can't do any more. You're probably beating up your recovery a lot. You're probably also approaching your maximum recoverable volume, your total number of limit sets, your high quality reps. It's not lack of training, or you're clearly training hard enough. I mean, if you're training to the point where you're getting buried on your heavier sets, such as, again, you've stalled. In other words, you know that you've stalled because you're failing reps, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't know that you've stalled unless you've tried more and failed. It's not that you aren't training hard enough. You probably are now not recovering enough. So when you back the 10% down, you're still stimulating adaptation, but you're recovering easier. And then you start progressing again. And as soon as you start progressing again, you're increasing tension until you stall again. All it is about having an organized way to balance recovery with training stress. That's it. That's the reason the 10% drop works. That's why. Pretty straightforward when you really look at it. But I can see why for a lot of people they don't understand why it works. That's all it is. That's how it works. All right, next question. Hey coach, after watching a video where you talked about low fat intake and injuries, I went on and did my own research about it, but would like to see what else you have to say about it. Since I do follow a low fat diet in terms of a percentage of total intake, wouldn't say it's low fat, maybe because I do have an intake of over 5,000 calories. So my 10% is actually close to at least 50 grams a day. Could you go further into this topic? Would love to hear what you have to say. Thanks. You're on a low fat diet, dude. You're definitely on a low fat diet. Like you're saying, well, I wouldn't say it's low fat because, my 10% is at least 50 grams a day. 50 grams a day is a low fat diet. Because for most people, it's anything under 20%, right? Anything under 20%. And let's say that you had a lower intake. Let's say it was 2,500 calories, right? Let's assume you had 2,500 calories instead. All right, 20% of that is 500 calories. All right, 500 calories. Calculate that. That's about 55 grams of fat. So 50 grams a day would still be considered a low-fat diet for someone on 2,500 calories. Of course it's low. Of course it's low. And I'm not saying you can't follow a low-fat diet. It's that when fat gets too low, when it gets too low, I think injury rates go up. I'm going to say for most people, for most healthy men, 50 to 60 grams is probably your bare minimum. If you start dropping below that, I think that's where you do have the risk of higher injury rates from training. And I think it has to do with inflammation. I think it has to do with fat-soluble vitamins. It has to do with a lot of these different factors going on, right? And you need that to help balance those things out. You need it. You need that fat intake. And again, I'm not telling people that they need a high-fat diet. For most people, I wouldn't advocate a high-fat diet. But keep in mind, 50 grams of fat a day is still a low-fat diet. Absolutely. Absolutely is. I mean, go do the math again. You'll see what I mean. Now, for someone like you who's eating 5,000 calories, you could still be on a low-fat diet on, 100 grams of fat, right? Now, that is no longer a low-fat diet for most people. That's more of a moderate fat diet for most people. You would still be low-fat. And you know what? I'd say it'd still be totally acceptable. It'd be totally acceptable for you because you're probably really athletic. If you're going through 5,000 calories a day, you're probably extremely athletic. And I'd say it'd probably still be fine for you. All right, next question. Best recovery methods: massage, Epsom salt bath, stretching, assuming diet, sleep, training are on point. I think massage is generally only useful if you have things like adhesions and stuff that need to be broken up, right? It can be useful in the right context. I wouldn't put it near the top of the list as far as these secondary things go. Now, this is all assuming diet, sleep, and training are on point, right? So you need to understand that. Everything you're doing beyond that is really minor in comparison. It's minor in comparison. Those are your big deals. I mean, training, programming, sleep, diet are 99% of your recovery. What are the ones that I think help them? I think Epsom salt bath. I think stretching can help post-workout in the right circumstances, some muscles. Absolutely. I'm going to say the hot Epsom salt baths. And the reason I'm going to say that is going to be multifold in nature. Number one, the heat. The heat in the Epsom salts themselves is beneficial in a lot of ways. It can get a lot of blood flow going, right? It can help with blood flow. It can help with these things. All right, that's a big deal. Definitely a big deal. The blood flow factor for recovery. What's the other thing going on? What does a really hot Epsom salt bath do for you? And yes, I do this myself for recovery. It relaxes you. Relaxes you. After you've trained, what's one of the most important things? Getting those stress hormones back under control, right? Because you want them elevated. People need to understand that. The worst thing you could ever do would be to find a product that actually blunted cortisol release during training, right? People try to sell you products to do that. If they actually worked, you wouldn't gain a single drop of muscle from your training. You also wouldn't get any faster from running. Let that sink in. Cortisol, when you're training, is essential, and extremely elevated cortisol levels produce extremely good results. It's correlated. But after your training, you want them to come back down. You want to bring them back down. It's helpful for muscle growth and recovery. That relaxing bath, it's relaxing. It's relaxing. Anything that helps you relax and unwind after you train, which is one reason stims and pre-workouts are really stupid. Anything that helps you relax after you train, it's going to help your muscle growth. It's going to help your recovery. So it's beneficial on multiple levels. All right, next question. How long do you think it should take to reach the strength goals you mentioned for a natural lifter, not genetically special? Oh man, there's a lot of variables there. I'm going to say if you're not genetically above average in any regard, because different people are going to have different gifts. You need to understand, people say stupid stuff like, oh, genetics. Unless you're talking about that 1% of genetic freaks who have a different muscle fiber distribution, everything else is about balance, meaning you're going to have genetic gifts in some things and not in others, because some things make you good at one thing and bad at another. Which one's the genetic gift? They both are. And you're going to tend to be one or the other in different things. So barring the genetic freak, it's a matter of getting all of these goals. Some people are just due to genetics are going to excel at one over the other. So we all have different leverages. We all have different limb lengths. So those goals that I break down are usually the 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 goal, right? I'm going to say that if you do everything perfect, and that includes bulking. I mean, I'm going to be honest. Most of you guys, if you're average height, you're going to need to bulk to at least 200 pounds. You can cut afterwards. And if you cut afterwards, you'll actually get the chin up and pull up one the easiest afterwards. That'll be the last one you get usually, right? If you bulk hard. But that's fine. It works. So if you do everything perfect and you're genetically average overall, probably 3 to 5 years. 3 to 5 years, totally reasonable. Totally reasonable. But you're probably going to have to bulk and cut. Like, you're not going to hit these in 3 years if you're genetically average unless you bulk pretty hard, probably for the first couple years. And then you can cut for a year after. If you take your time with it, do more recomping and stuff instead, you're probably going to take closer to 5 years to pull it off. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 3.